New Year, same fascism? Let's hope not. J Pork's podcast, exclusively on Least Coast Radio. Mile journey begins with one step. Progressives took that step on November 6th. The journey's not over, but we took a step in the right direction.
If you don't know what Staten Island is, it's like New York's abortion that lived.
Did you see New York 11 elected a Democrat? New York 11 is Staten Island, the most Trumpian place in New York City. Elected a Democrat. Don't try to tell me it wasn't a wave. Robert Mueller isn't the only person investigating Trump now. We have the House Intel Committee is now chaired by Adam Schiff, and they have subpoena power. And he will use it. And he will get to the bottom of this, like he's been trying to do for the last 2 years, and Devin Nunes has been stymieing him. Devin Nunes is no longer the chairman. The midnight runs to the White House are over. I made a promise to the listeners of Least Coast Radio that if the Democrats did not mess up November, that if November 6th went our way, that we would have a little fun here on Least Coast Radio. And if you stay tuned, I promise you this. Along with our fighting fascism and trying to save democracy, we will have a little fun. Because we earned it. Keep it locked to Least Coast Radio. Remember, we got Dies in Your House at the end of the week. We got the J Porks podcast at the beginning of the week. Every week, Least Coast Radio for the least heard voices. Get us on Patreon, patreon.com/JPorks, and follow us on Twitter at Least Coast Radio. Let's punch fascism in the face. One podcast at a time.
If you don't know what Staten Island is, it's like New York's abortion that lived. Representing Staten Island. Staten Island was no joke.
This is about to get real embarrassing.
Hey yo, what is the word, peeps? Welcome back into another action-packed edition of the J Porks podcast, exclusively on Least Coast Radio for the least heard voices. I am J Porks. With me, as always, on the other side of the glass, making sure this is a well-oiled podcast machine. Every week is the ever-popular Nobody. That on the intro is Katy Perry covering track 3 from the Watch the Throne. That's still on YouTube, so I think I'm allowed to use it, a little portion of it, on my podcast. So there's that. That was cool. Me and my girlfriend were watching that over the weekend or the week. So I thought I would use that as the intro to my podcast. What goes on, peeps? Welcome back into another action-packed podcast here on Least Coast Radio, J Pork's podcast. What we do here on Least Coast Radio is we fight fascism. And I want to introduce a little new addition to the podcast. So, we fight fascism, and you might ask yourself, Jay, what is fascism? Well, Alexa, tell me about fascism.
Fascism is a form of radical authoritarian ultranationalism, characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition and strong regimentation of society and of the economy, which came to prominence in early 20th century Europe.
Sounds about right. So we're trying to keep that from happening in America, right? Simple enough. Simple enough, right? Simple enough task. Let democracy run wild. Right? But what happened was, stuff got out of hand. So we started to address it on the podcast. And not only that, we address it on 2 podcasts. At the end of the week, on Fridays, we have Dies in Your House. That is a 20-minute short mini podcast which previews what we're going to talk about today. And today we have some stuff. Was Michael Cohen in Prague? There's a theory. We'll get into that in the thread count later on. But first, let's just, when children die, that always comes first. And that's what I want to talk about here. We had a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old killed. They died in custody, in American custody. Americans had captured, because this is what they're doing. Because you see, like, oh, they got children in cages. Call it what it is. The American government is kidnapping children. They're kidnapping people at the border. They're taking asylum seekers, and they are abducting them, and they are putting them in work camps. And these camps are not, just places with a bed that they get to stay. And we're going to talk about, we'll read something later on in the podcast, and you'll find out why the private prison industry is loving this tent city stuff that's going on right now. But children died. And that was supposed to be under the care of Americans, of the American government. Now, it's one thing if your xenophobic policies... Alexa, what is xenophobia?
The noun xenophobia is usually defined as fear or hatred of foreigners, people from different cultures, or strangers.
If your xenophobic... Thank you, Alexa. If your xenophobic policies cause you to want to turn people away at the border, that's one thing that is highly inhumane and un-American. Okay? But to let children die and then not have an answer for it. Christian Nielsen tried to blame influenza. Well, she said that the child, because she had to testify, she had to answer questions about it to members of Congress when it was only one kid that died, a second kid died. After that, she had to answer questions about this. And she said that the child's, didn't get good health care, his entire life. And that played a big role. Well, excuse me if Guatemala doesn't have single payer. I can't believe we're even talking about this. Places like Guatemala and Honduras don't have good health care. If they did, maybe people wouldn't walk thousands of miles to get away from those places. So for you to say, oh, well, probably came here with the flu. It's their fault for bringing their children. It's their fault for bringing their children? Did you want their children to get slaughtered? Did you want their children to watch their village burn down? Their family members beheaded? And be forced into slave labor? Oh, wait, that's something that's kind of already happening anyway. And then recently they're just dropping migrants off at a bus stop? What is that? What kind of America is this? These are not the policies, these are not the things that America was founded on. Killing children on Christmas. Now, if say this child was in the custody of the Romans when he died on Christmas, what would happen then? Would you start a religion? That's what I want to know. So it's, the American government took it one step further than just denying people asylum. We just straight killing kids now. And kidnapping them and removing them from their parents. What does that do? If you kidnap immigrant babies and put them in the foster system, aren't you adding... You're adding to the, you're letting them across anyway. Why not let the fam across? And how about these people can work and get jobs and contribute to society? Again, we got a poll, Gallup. I was talking about this on Dies in Your House. We got a Gallup poll that has 76% of Americans think that immigration is good for America. Let's repeat that. 76% of Americans think immigration is good for America. 65% of GOPers think immigration is good for America. The only thing that this government shutdown, wall, crybaby bullcrap is all about is gaining supporters. Is keeping the base, as they say. Throwing some red meat to the base. It's okay that, 200,000 federal workers are furloughed over the holiday season. It's okay, because they're going to know I was serious about keeping out the brown people. It's a political stunt. And political stunts are one thing, but when they put lives in danger and when they put lives in jeopardy and children end up dead, someone has to answer for that. There needs to be some accountability. How many times, how many egregious things are going to happen without any accountability? And on January 3rd, this ends. On January 3rd, the Republicans holding all three branches of government simultaneously is over, as the Democrats will take over the House of Representatives. They will take the gavels with their 40-seat swing, with the blue wave. They will take over, and there will be investigations into everything. There's going to be so many investigations that I'm already, planning my Blue Wave 2020 tweet storms, because we're going to need to maintain the House in 2020, because we're going to need longer than 2 years to investigate these fucks. We're going to need a lot longer than that. So the Democrats need to stay in power in the House of Representatives for the next, 2 or 3 election cycles, so we can actually get investigations done. Speaking of the House, really fast, just want to mention this. Again, we're getting back to Americans killing children at the border and the conditions of migrants. We got a little something on that later. I'm going to read something and we're going to talk about it. But I just want to, while we're in the House of Representatives, while the government is still shut down until January 3rd, when the Democrats take the House and pass a spending bill, and then, we see how many Republicans have the balls to vote it down in the Senate, and then we see if Trump vetoes it. But the government will not open until the 3rd. But the House GOP finished its investigation into, remember they were investigating the FBI, DOJ, and Hillary Clinton's emails? Trey Gowdy, Bob Goodlatte, they came out and said they didn't find anything. That's what they said. quietly ended their investigation into nothing. But they made sure not to make any noise about it. It's over because it was a phony investigation to begin with. And Trey Gowdy, I don't know, he seems to be wanting to step away from this whole... I mean, I guess he saw himself at the hearing and he saw himself looking like a fool. Getting struck down by Peter Strzok. Again, no one's saying that Peter Strzok was, handling himself in a professional manner. I'm just saying. Trey Gowdy looked like a damn fool. Looked like a damn fool. Or maybe he's shaping himself for a Supreme Court seat. He thinks he is, anyway. Maybe the lowest circuit. 9th Circuit, something like that. He's already got, the fash hairstyle going. You notice everyone's got the fash? We call it the fash because it's what Hitler did. It's a little side thing, a little line right there, going down. It's the fash. Alexa, what is fascism?
The noun fascism is usually defined as a governmental system led by a dictator having complete power, forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism, regimenting all industry, commerce, etc., and emphasizing an aggressive nationalism and often racism.
On East Coast Radio, we try to fight fascism, and we do it one podcast at a time. And we're going to continue to do it when we wonder aloud, was Michael Cohen in Prague in 2016? We will try to get the answers to those questions when we come back after this. Hey, yo! Jay Porks here, recording my own commercials as per usual. But I am here to tell you about going to patreon.com/JPorks, and you have the opportunity to help support Least Coast Radio by becoming a Least Coast Radio head. How do you do that, you say? Well, there are 3 different tiers to choose from, where you can find yourself bonus content, bonus features from the Jay Porks podcast, from Dies in Your House, from all things Least Coast Radio. Now, what are those features? Well, they're bonus shows. They're getting shows early. They're getting exclusive artwork mailed to the address of your choosing monthly. You can interact with all the hosts here on Least Coast Radio. You can get shout-outs on the podcast. Behind the scenes stuff. That's on Dies in Your House and the Jay Porks podcast. You get them both here on Least Coast Radio. Dies in Your House is usually the primer at the end of the week. The Jay Porks podcast is the long show. What we do at the beginning of the week to get you going, to take in everything that happened. But I need some help. And how you can help Least Coast Radio is by following us on Twitter at Least Coast Radio, going to patreon.com/JPorks, becoming a Patreon, becoming a Least Coast Radio head. And, if you don't want to do any of those things, you can smash that subscribe button on iTunes or YouTube. And, it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt to share the podcast with your friends. So keep it locked to Least Coast Radio for the least heard voices. We're here fighting fascism, saving democracy, but we're also going to have a little fun. Keep it locked. And we are back. At least we are most likely back. To be honest, I record the thread count separately from the rest of the podcast. So I would usually buffer this with a little Patreon commercial, reminding you guys to go to patreon.com/JPorks and become a Least Coast Radiohead. But in case I didn't, there it is. And we are going to get into the latest edition of the thread count. And before we do, you might be asking yourself, Jay, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about sheets? I'm not talking about sheets, even though sheets are silky smooth, and I like things that are silky smooth, except when it's hot out. then you sweat and you stick to it, and it's very annoying. But anyway, satin's good. But anyway, the thread count is a portion of the J Parks podcast. It's a segment where we go to Twitter and we give it to you straight from the sources. Because when you tweet, tweeting, you can only tweet 280 characters. I think that's what the number is now. So it's not much for storytelling. But there's a feature now, there's a feature where you can reply to your own tweet. And if you reply to your own tweet, and you reply to that tweet, and you reply to that tweet, they're all connected. And it's called a thread. And when we go on Twitter and get it straight from the sources and read you the information, we call that J Porks Presents the Thread Count. And the reason why we have the thread count is because, to be honest, I could sit here and read you the latest article from the New York Times detailing Michael Cohen being in Prague, or was he not in Prague, or I can go to the Washington Post, I can read that to you. I could, but that's kind of boring. I'd rather give it to you from the people who have been following this, who I've been following, who have been right all along, the people who have written books, essays, articles, novels, who have written stuff about this, who have been on top of it. And just to name a couple of people, because I try to name most of the people who I go to my thread count needs for. Listen, you got Greg Oliar. He wrote a book called Dirty Rubles, An Introduction to Trump Russia. My close personal friend. He came on the podcast when he first dropped his book, and we spoke for an hour. And I actually that interview is probably going to be put out on its own as my best of 2018 thing that I did, because that's the best thing I did this year. And Greg was nice enough to come on my show, even though I'm a nobody, I'm a nothing, and he came on and he, told me, and, I got his book. And what you need to do is go buy his book, and you could do that at Amazon or any of your fine retailers. But anyway, there's Greg Oliar. I get a lot of information from Dr. Dena Grayson. You can follow her on Twitter at Dr. Dena Grayson. I get a lot of stuff from Seth Abramson at Seth Abramson. He has a lot of good threads. Also, there's Spicy Files. There is Eric Garland. There is John Schindler at 20 Committee. There is T-Pain USA. There's a lot of people on Twitter. The Horse Whisperer, Man in the Hoodie. There's a lot of people on there's a lot of people on Twitter that have a lot more information about this than I do. So instead of reading, some some career journalist opinion who writes for the Washington Post, or the New York Times, the people that focused on Hillary's emails more than Trump's Russia connection during the election, how about we get it from the people who have been saying, hey, listen, this guy, this Trump, this Russia thing, this is real. There are no witches. Robert Mueller is not investigating, he's not deep in this because of some campaign finance violation. He's not investigating fellatio in the Oval Office. Robert Mueller's investigating what some would call treason. And you should just know that. Treason, hasn't been changed. Treason and being a traitor to your country is supposed to be punishable by death. At least that's what it used to be. And if people are going to read, amendments and bills of rights word for word the way they used to be 200 years ago, then, people at least need to go to jail for this treason stuff. And, there's so much misinformation out there that, I ask myself all the time, are we actually turning into a country where facts no longer matter and where words don't mean a thing anymore? Because Michael Cohen is on Twitter claiming Michael Cohen is on Twitter claiming that he wasn't in Prague. His cell phone pinged in Prague. The Steele dossier had Michael Cohen in Prague in June. Now, you don't need your passport. Like, there's a part of Europe where you don't need your passport to enter certain places. So, the passport doesn't matter. The cell phone ping does. So, this is the one thing that I, like, Michael Cohen has already worked with Mueller. He's allegedly given up everything he's got, or he's given up a lot, information-wise, because he got 3 years in prison for doing, 15 years worth of crimes. I mean, the judge said that his help with the Mueller probe didn't absolve him from, his other crimes, his taxicab stuff, his, the fake lobbying that he did, the fixer, all that stuff, the hush money. But after all that, now Michael Cohen's on Twitter, and somebody asked him if he was in Prague, and he's still sticking by no, and he says Mueller knows everything. Alright. So I don't know. Everything else in the Steele dossier is coming true. Has been proven fact. So what I did was, I went to our aforementioned buds on Twitter. The peeps that know more than me about it. Like, for instance, our first thread is going to be from Greg Oliar. Greg is a close personal friend of mine. He was on this podcast. He wrote a book, Dirty Rubles, an introduction to Trump Russia. And I suggest everyone goes out and buys it. You go on Amazon, you look for it, go to your local bookstore and ask for it. And to be honest, I go to my local bookstore and I ask for it, even though I already have a copy, because I want them to order it, so they'll have a copy in stock. Because that's how I roll. But it's a very informative book, a quick read, a primer on this stuff. So, usually in the thread count, I go to him. I go to his Twitter, and I say, okay, what's Greg got cooking for me today? And that's what we're going to do when we how we kick off the thread count first, with our buddy Greg Oliar. You can follow him on Twitter at Greg Oliar. So, nothing to it but to do it as we go. And this is from, this thread is from the 27th. And it starts off, went back and reread the Steele dossier. And after mulling it over, I have a theory about this Prague business. To be clear, this is only a theory. Theory. 1. First, as mentioned before, Cohen, Lanny Davis, Hannity, Trump, all of them swatted down the Prague part of the dossier. Not the part about meeting with Russians, the Prague part. Even now, Cohen denies being in Prague. And then there's a screenshot of the Michael Cohen, not a screenshot, linked up to the Michael Cohen tweet where he denies being in Prague. 2. Dossier says the meeting was last week of August or first week of September 2016. Luis Mensch calculates that Cohen was unaccounted for from the night of the 25th of August through lunchtime on the 28th of August. More than enough time for a quick jaunt to Europe. And you go to Patriobotics and read that blog. 3. Steele writes that his source got the information in an unusual manner. Quote, communications had been cryptic for security reasons. Unquote. Cryptic literally means in code. 4. Last few pages of the dossier talks about a Cohen-Russians meeting in Prague, during which it was agreed that hackers would go into a bot hole in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, where they would, quote, lay low until the dust settled after the election. 5. Remember the episode of The Wire when the cops figured out the code the criminals used on the phone was just the number opposite of 5, so a 2 would be an 8, and so on, because the code had to be simple. 6. What if the cities were reversed? What if that was the cryptic nature of the communications? The meeting took place in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. The hacker's bolt hole was in Prague. Cohen, I doubt he was anywhere long enough for it to matter. He likely never left the airport, like when Clinton met Lynch on the tarmac, only with treason. So it doesn't matter if the sit-down was in Prague, Plovdiv, or Poughkeepsie. What matters is that it happened. If the bolt hole was in Prague, that means Prague is where the hackers went after the job was done to, quote, lay low, and likely to get paid. Which is what the hacker Yevgeny Nikulin, remember him, was doing when he was arrested in Prague on the 5th of October, 2016. As for the cell phone ping, that mostly proves that one of Cohen's phones was there, which, if that's where the hackers were camped out, is not completely out of bounds. 10. Again, this is a theory. It's probably way off base. I'll probably be proven wrong by tomorrow. But I can't shake the feeling that with all the Prague denials, we're barking up the wrong tree here. End. And that's something. Because, again, they're not denying the meeting of the Russians. They're not denying the plotting of the hacking. There's these little things that they're denying. Like, where it took place. Why would they deny? Like, what? Michael Cohen didn't fire off a tweet saying, oh, I just want to clear this up. Somebody asked him, hey, Michael Cohen, quick question. Were you in Prague asking for about 80,000 friends? And, he replied to some rando saying no. He didn't need to do that. Dude, I would delete my account. I'd be spending every waking moment with my family right now. And first of all, we all know that Michael Cohen has, Russian mafia ties. What if he gave somebody up? Then he's really got to lay low. Don't be tweeting. Twitter's got your location, man. But the Prague business is questionable. Because they're not denying that they were colluding with Russians. What Trump is, but Trump's an asshole. No collusion. Man, I can't wait till fascism is no longer in fashion in America. Hey Alexa, what is fascism?
The noun fascism is usually defined as a governmental system led by a dictator having complete power, forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism, regimenting all industry, commerce, etc., and emphasizing an aggressive nationalism and often racism.
Sounds about right in America 2018. Okay. Moving on. And this is why we do the thread count in the first place. Because the thread count is about finding out things before you see it on the news. Because here's what happened. The news told us that Trump wasn't going to win. And people believed it. So now, nothing on news is gospel anymore. You must confirm all your sources, even if we're going to be citizens in this country. And the Time magazine story that dropped over the weekend is the perfect example. It says that there was a spy who was making... Well, let's read the little Twitter highlights here. Russian ex-spy pressured Manafort over debts to oligarch. And Twitter has a couple of little synopsis here. The Russian ex-spy Viktor Boyarkin pressured Manafort over his debts connected to Oleg Deripaska, a powerful Putin ally who loaned Manafort millions of dollars. Manafort was deeply in debt when he joined the Trump campaign in 2016, court filings show, yet he offered to work for free as Trump's presidential campaign manager. He resigned in August 2016 when his Ukraine and Russia ties were revealed. Described as a former arms dealer with a high forehead and low profile, Viktor Boyarkin was added to the U.S. sanctions list on December 19th of this year, I'm assuming. So, we knew that. If you follow the people who I told you to follow at the beginning of this segment. If you follow the Greg Oliars, the Dr. Denigrations, the Spicy Files, the Eric Garlands of the world, you know that Paul, or if you even watch Rachel Maddow, I'm fairly certain Rachel Maddow has covered this already, like months ago. I know Time Magazine has it now and it's written in words, but I'm fairly certain. I mean, I knew about this. Not that, I'm some secret, awesome journalist. I'm not even a journalist or awesome, but we know that he came to work for the campaign for free because he wanted to make his debts whole. He wanted to work for the campaign, and then working for the campaign would have made him not owe Oleg Deripaska any more money. We knew that. We all read that. We all saw that. We all heard that. We all said, yep, that's real news. Because it is. Because why would anyone work for free? Who does that? Somebody that really wants that job. That's who. Somebody who wants that job so bad. So bad. They're willing to work for free because they want some loans forgiven from some Russian oligarch who basically is the aluminum business in Russia. I can't pronounce his company. I'm not trying. Or the place they're from. No, I can pronounce his company. The place they're from. I can't pronounce it. But the point is that Paul Manafort came to work on the Trump campaign for free because he thought that would make his debts with Oleg Deripaska, a sanctioned Russian oligarch. He thought that would make those disappear. That's it. That's your story. I don't need the Montenegro connection. I don't need to read the whole thing because I already knew that. Isn't it weird? And I'm not this guy. I am not Mr. Bash the Media guy. I really do love the media. Full disclosure, I majored in communications in college. I wanted to be the media. I wanted to work in media somewhat communicate. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a radio DJ. Then I found that they don't pick the songs. Growing up, I wanted to, work behind the scenes in television. Something like what I'm watching on television now. Now, every time I do my podcast, I think to myself, you know what? Maybe I'm getting a little too liberal, but you know what? I'm close to Manhattan. So if NBC ever needs somebody during the holidays to sit in a chair and talk about, what's going on in the suburbs of Staten Island, being a liberal over here, I will share with them all that information they need. And I will do it for free, as long as they let me plug my podcast. But in all seriousness, Paul Manafort's a hardened up criminal. Mafia to the core. Like, do you remember a few weeks ago, there was a story breaking that Paul Manafort met with Julian Assange? And then the story changed to no, Paul Manafort met with the Ecuadorian president to try to get Julian Assange to the United States. And I saw that and I said, that's weird, because they're, on the same side. They're on Team Russia, Assange and Manafort. So why would Manafort try to get Assange to give himself up? Or to secure Assange for the United States or to the UK? And I'll tell you why. Money. That's all it was. All it is money. Paul Manafort's so hard up for cash that he tried to get Julian Assange prosecuted for money. Not for being a patriot, not for thinking, oh, well, I'm hacking this election with Russians, maybe I should try doing something good to even my karma, even out my chi. No, he didn't want to get centered. He wanted to get paid. And that is the roots of the Trump campaign. These people don't want to be patriots. These people want to be paid. That's all these people are concerned about. How can I take the office and working for the campaign and the inauguration and the transition and working in the fascist regime? How can I take this opportunity and not help America, not help fatten the wallet of America, but how can I take this opportunity and help fatten the wallet of myself. It's not what you can do for your country, it's what you can steal from your country from taxpayers without them really realizing, because you're tweeting racist, xenophobic, fascist stuff. Disgusting. And if you thought that 2018 was a wild ride, if you listen to East Coast Radio twice a week and you say to yourself, oh man, Jay, it's getting crazy, I don't know if I can handle another year of this. Well, I'm sure on Amazon they got seatbelts. You should buy one and buckle in, because we got a long ride into this. Long ride. Alright. On to other stuff. Hey yo! J Porks here. Back to recording my own commercials. And here's the deal. You may have heard me complaining on today's podcast or a previous podcast about suffering through a summer of unemployment. Well, we have a fix for that, and it is called Patreon. That's right. East Coast Radio now has a Patreon page, and all you need to do is go to patreon.com/jporks, and there are 3 tiers that you can subscribe to, 3 tiers you can join to become a member of East Coast Radio, of the East Coast Radio community, of Porks Nation. You'll even have a chance to pick the name and all that stuff. And we are not offering just thank yous and shout outs. We got bonus content. There is even a tier where you are able to talk to me on the phone every week. And we will go over what is happening in our country. And you could personally talk to me, Jay Pork. Personal interactions. There's a tier where there's a group. You can join a group, and you could affect where the podcast goes that week. I need a community. I need help. Not necessarily money, but I need people to be helping me out. So therefore, that's why I created a East Coast Radio Patreon. Not to be confused with a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter. This is not me with my handout. I have bonus content. Bonus content to offer you. I have tons of it. I have tons of time, and I want to give it to you. All you need to do is join us on Patreon. Become a Patreon. Patreon.com/jporks. Look for the East Coast Radio Patreon page. You'll see me. You'll see me with a microphone and dies in your house next to the name. You'll see that. So just go hit us on Patreon. You will get a thank you. I will know that, and you will have a lot to do with what goes down on the J Porks podcast and everything concerned with East Coast Radio. It's going to be a big year for us. 2018. Let's get it done. And we are back. Alright, we're going to piggyback off something we opened the show with. It's the last show of the year. Obviously, because it's the last available day where a show will be. It's the last day of the week of 2018 where a podcast on East Coast Radio is going to come out. So I thought I would do something fun in the last half, and I still might. There's still time. But what I really wanted to do was get into this whole... Okay, so... Do you remember when Trump was getting elected? You know, one of the things offhandedly that was said, that I said, that many people, many like-minded folks have said, as I try to click things as I'm recording my podcast, is the real winners in this election, the private prison industry. For-profit prisons. Now that's a fact. And you know what else the private prisons are enjoying? The migrant crisis. Let's get into the Daily Beast as I'm reporting here. And this is Doink's music because, of course, it's a clown show. $800 million in taxpayer money went to private prisons where migrants work for pennies. And this is Spencer Ackerman and Adam Rawnsley on the byline. For $3 a day, Yasika works the graveyard shift in the kitchens for for the for-profit immigration prison where she is locked up. Each morning at 1 a.m., the guards of the Joe Corley Detention Facility in southeast Texas rouse Yasika and the other 35 women who share a dormitory-style room. Work begins an hour later and lasts through sunrise, ending at 8 a.m. Yasika does everything from cooking breakfast, serving her fellow detainees, to cleaning up. Even at $3, toiling in the kitchen pays better than sweeping prison corridors, which pays the Immigration and Customs Enforcement a stipulated minimum of $1 a day. The work, officially speaking, isn't mandatory, but, quote, since there's absolutely nothing to do inside, Yasika said, detainees work to keep at bay the stress of not knowing when they'll be released, or if they'll be deported. Yasika, 23, fled her native El Salvador after MS-13 persecuted her for being a lesbian. The brutal gang, which the Trump administration uses to demonize all immigrants like her, murdered her father, and she came to the United States to seek the safety of rejoining her family here. She instead spent the last 2 years locked inside ISIS prisons. Quote, this is a really terrible place, Yasika told the Daily Beast through a translator from the Corley Center. It's inhumane. It's like a torture chamber. These are dangerous times for undocumented immigrants. ICE has been supercharged by the Trump administration, and ICE's empowerment has been lucrative for the companies that both cage and employ immigrants like Yasika. A Daily Beast investigation found that in 2018 alone, for-profit immigration detention was a nearly $1 billion industry underwritten by taxpayers and beset by problems that include suicide, minimal oversight, and what immigration advocates say, uncomfortably resembles slave labor. Being in the U.S. illegally is a misdemeanor offense, and the immigration detention is technically a civil matter, not a criminal one, not a criminal process. But the reality looks much different. The Daily Beast reported last month that as of October 9th, ICE was detaining an average of 44,631 people every day, an all-time high. Now ICE has told the Daily Beast that its last detention numbers are even higher, 44,892 people. As of December 8th, its budget request for the current fiscal year anticipates detaining 52,000 people daily. Expanding the number of immigrants rounded up into jails isn't just policy, it's big business. Yasika's employer and jailer, the private prison giants GEO Group, expect earnings to grow to $2.3 billion this year. Like other private prison companies, it made large donations to the Trump campaign and inaugural. Pinning down the size and scope of the immigration prison industry is obscured by government secrecy, but the Daily Beast combed through ICE budget submissions and other records to compile as comprehensive of a list as possible of what for-profit prisons charge taxpayers to lock up a growing population, and how many of those facilities detain on average. The result? For 19 privately owned or operated detention centers in which the Daily Beast could find recent pricing data, ICE paid an estimated $807 million in the fiscal year of 2018. Those 19 prisons hold 18,000 people, meaning that for-profit prisons currently lock up about 41% of the 44,000 people detained by ICE. That's not a comprehensive total. The true figures are likely significantly higher. The National Immigrant Justice Center estimated that for November 2017, roughly 71% of immigrant detainees that are smaller. Start that sentence over. The National Immigrant Justice Center estimated that for November 2017, roughly 70% of immigrant detainees than a smaller total figure were held in 33 privately operated jails, just like the Joe Corley Detention Center in Texas, where Yasika resides. Providing a comprehensive tally of ICE detention centers is difficult. The Department of Homeland Security claims ICE operates, quote, nearly 250, but a study earlier this month of the American Immigration Council found 638 sites, more than twice the Department of Homeland Security's figure. ICE told the Daily Beast it uses over 205 facilities, citing information on its website that immigration researchers consider incomplete and misleading. Separating out the privately run facilities is even more difficult. Some of ICE's state and local partnership prisons are run by for-profit companies, and the complete lists are frustratingly difficult to find. In response to the Daily Beast queries, ICE said it could not provide a full breakdown or contractor-operated immigration process. Quote, ensuring there are sufficient beds available to meet the current demand for detention space is crucial to the success of ICE's overall mission. Accordingly, the agency is continually reviewing its detention requirements and exploring options that will afford ICE the operational flexibility needed to house the full range of detainees in the agency's custody, said ICE spokesman Danielle Bennett. But Mary Small of the Detention Watch Network says the public still lacks, quote, incredibly basic information about immigration detention and how private prison companies are profiting from it. Even though billions of taxpayer dollars are being obligated to private prison companies, the contracts between them and the federal government aren't publicly available. So we don't know how much these companies are being paid, how much people they're holding, or how long their contracts will last, Small said. The culture of secrecy, bolstered by revolving door policies and political contributions, have paved the way for rapid and reckless expansion of the detention system. GEO Group, which owns the Corley Center, is just one example. It held a daily average of 917 people in the previous fiscal year at Corley. Beyond Corley, it detained roughly 11,000 immigrants at 17 prisons. The 10 GEO Group facilities the Daily Beast could find pricing data for charged an average of about $101 per prisoner per day, compared to ICE's overall projected $121.90 average daily rate for adult beds in the fiscal year of 2018. But the Government Accountability Office warned in April that ICE consistently lowballs its detention costs through dubious accounting. GEO Group did not respond for requests for comment. While for-profit immigration detention by no means began under Trump's watch, the Trump administration has been very good for the corporation. In November, GEO Group reported that it expects to earn $2.3 billion this year, including immigration detention revenues, an increase of nearly 1.8% from the $2.26 billion it reported in 2017, and up 5.5% from the $2.18 billion it earned in 2016, the year it began imprisoning Yasika. That same year, GEO gave $281,360 to Trump's campaign. In 2004, GEO Group spent $120,000 on federal lobbying. By 2016, it was spending $1.2 million. Fellow private prison industry giant Core Civic spent nearly $10 million between 2008 and 2014 just to lobby the House Appropriations Subcommittee that controls immigration detention funding. Together, according to the Migration Policy Institute, the two corporations dished out a combined $500,000 to Trump's inauguration campaign. In essence, immigration advocates say the detention corporations paid Trump and his congressional allies, whose enthusiasm for treating immigration as a crime ensures delivery of a growing population of captives to companies that pay them far below a minimum wage. ICE's internal detention standards set pay for voluntary immigrant labor at only at least $1 a day. The negative impact of confinement shall be reduced through decreased idleness, improved morale, and fewer disciplinary incidents, ICE contends, even though immigration detention is supposed to be administrative, not punitive. Lawsuits over the past few years present an alarming accumulation of accounts that labor within the private prisons is less, quote, voluntary than the corporations insist. A class action lawsuit against GEO Group initially by 9 detainees in Colorado claimed that tens of thousands of immigrants have been forced to work for their $1 a day wage. A different lawsuit against GEO Group in California claims a systematic and unlawful wage theft, unjust enrichment, and forced labor, including a scheme in which the corporation requires work to, quote, buy the basic necessities, including food, water, and hygiene products, that GEO refuses to provide for them. Washington State sued GEO Group in 2017 for paying its detainees $1 a day, and sometimes in what the complaint calls snack food, rather than the $11 an hour state minimum wage. GEO Group has vigorously contested the suits, though not always successful. To the extent that the industry is in the business of expanding the system so they can make more money off holding immigrants that can be confined and doing everything possible to profit off of it by labor processes like getting detainees to work and paying them $1 a day, there is very little distinction you can draw between slave labor and what they're doing, said Emily Rowe, an associate professor at University of California Gold School of Law. The differences between for-profit immigration prisons and public immigration prisons are substantial, according to recent research by Rowe and colleagues based on data from the fiscal year of 2015. Even though for-profit companies operate only an estimated 10% of the ICE detention facilities, both Ryu and the National Immigrant Justice Center found that more than 2/3 of all detainees have been held at least once at a privately run prison. Those for-profit prisons constantly and substantially hold immigrants longer than public ones, about 87 days on average for people ultimately granted relief, versus 33.3 days in public prisons. 15 of the 197 detainees who died in ICE custody between October 2003 and February 2018 were held at a single private immigration detention center run by Core Civic in Arizona, according to the Migration Policy Institute. At another privately run immigration detention jail, GEO Group's ICE Processing Center in California, there have been 7 suicide attempts between December 2016 and October 2017, and at least one success. A September Department of Homeland Security Inspector General's report showed photographs of bed sheets hanging as improvised nooses inside Adelanto cells. A detainee told inspectors, "I've seen a few attempted suicides using braided sheets by the vents, and the guards laugh at them and call them suicide failures once they're back from medical." Another detainee death classified as a suicide occurred at Core Civic Stewart Detention Facility in July 2008, also using a bedsheet noose. And ICE turns what its own watchdog warns is a blind eye to detention conditions. It even contracts out substantial amounts of oversight of its detention centers. A June report by the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General found that the inspections contractor, Nakamoto, uses practices that are, quote, not consistently thorough, and its inspections, quote, don't fully examine the actual conditions or identify compliance deficiencies. While ICE's additional in-house inspections are more thorough, they found 475 deficiencies at the same 29 sites, when Nakamoto only found 209. The Inspector General found those inspections, quote, too infrequent to ensure the facilities implement all corrections. The result, the Inspector General says, is that ICE doesn't, quote, ensure adequate oversight or systemic improvements to detention conditions. And so this dribbles on. I don't want to cut it short there, but like we only need the front. We only need the front. I don't need to know, like, it might be Jessica or Yasika. I went with Yasika because I go with the one that sounds less American, because that's usually the one that's right. Okay, so this article right here from the Daily Beast. Now let's talk about it. That's a lot. It's a lot to take in, but private prisons are enjoying the rise of the fascist regime more than anybody. And who knew? And like when the election happened and Jeff Sessions was made attorney general, and I was like, well, it's private prisons are really, mandatory minimums, private prisons, all that's coming back, civil asset forfeiture, all that stuff. I didn't realize that the private prison sector would get in on the detention centers as well. This is much like how Eric Prince wants the Iraq contract. He wants to be Billy Russo in The Punisher, and, we're going to sell the war to some other private company. It's insane what is going on at the border. And this is why when people say abolish ICE, you don't get immediate pushback from it. Now, listen, I understand. I'm a Democrat. I'm also a realist, right? So, I get why people would run, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and people like that. I get why they would run on an abolish ICE platform. But when you use the word abolish, then that just triggers the red meat Republicans. Oh, do you sleep? Let me ask you a question. At night, when you go in your house, do you have a door on your house? You have a door, right? Because you want to keep people out. Same thing. Not the same thing at all. It's really not. So instead of, saying abolish ICE, what we really need to do, in all seriousness, is reform ICE. Crush it. Build it back up. It's like Play-Doh. You build something you don't like. What do? You smash it. Same thing with the old school Legos. Not Legos now, where you can't actually have your own imagination. But I mean old school plain Legos. I remember I used to build things from Legos, and if I didn't like it, if it wasn't working out for me, you know what I did? I broke it down and I built it again. In a different way. With a different structure. That's what we should be doing as Americans. So let's just say, listen, I don't think it's right. I don't think we should be putting migrants in detention centers. But if that's the way we have to do it, the detention center doesn't have to be worse than a hotel that would offer 4-hour stays, and it doesn't have to cost more money than a hotel that 4-hour stays. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep it real. I was just on my Expedia app. Not too long ago. When's the last time? Alright, maybe it was my girlfriend's birthday. Maybe it was a while ago. Or it was over the summer. It was a while ago. Either way. You get some good deals on Expedia. You can get a nice place for $80 a day. This ICE detention center, these beds cost over $100 a day. You tell me, somebody explain to me how migrants seeking asylum from dangerous countries, you tell me how it is fiscally irresponsible to not only put them in detention centers, but actually, not speed up the process so you don't have to, pay over $100. So taxpayers don't have to pay over $100 a day to keep someone in jail. That's what it is. It's jail. They get $1 a day to work. Oh boy. Well, the good news is they are making more than me to work. So that is a thing. Speaking of work, I have one more week of unemployment to certify for. And I should have done that a half hour ago. But in all seriousness, the party of fiscal responsibility is over here costing taxpayers $1 a day. $100 a day to imprison people who they don't want in the country anyway. And as it appears, I go to the website, I believe I am out of unemployment, and that is it for me. Time to get a job. Okay, so since I need to go get a job, I need to stop recording this podcast right this second and go get a job. So before I do that, let me give you the list of websites you need to go to help keep me in business. First of all, there is ContentConfessions.com. That's where you're going to get all your live music news and reviews for the fans, by the fans. Go to leastcoastradio.com. Go to leastcoastradio.weebly.com. It's a new website. Tell me what you think of it. Go to patreon.com/jporks and go to, for music news, go to anyquiet.com, your source for quality. Until next week, Wacky Weed and Warren Zevon, resist, remove, fight for recreational, and please, somebody, if anyone's hiring, let me know. J Porks, East Coast Radio.